My name is Ruben de Groot, also known as Man with No Shadow, formerly the Man zonder schaduw. I was asked to do a talk today at 50 Hertz, and I took a while to think about which subject I would choose. And in the end, I thought it would be nice to focus on the fact that I've done a lot of different things. When I look at a lot of the other artists and speakers here at the seminar, I see that they focus on one thing, which can be very interesting. I saw some interesting things about producing or about DJ gear and stuff like that. But I think that for me personally, I can add something to your experience by talk about some of the differences, because I've focused on different phases in my life with obsession and a lot of passion on different things. And to summarize it, I thought these were, first of all, throwing parties. So you could call this promoting, but in my experiences, this was also creating something special, an experience. The second thing I've done is DJing. And for me, DJing is also about an art of taking people on a journey. Back in the days, I started with vinyl. And I really wanted to learn every single aspect of this. And in the end, I was able to play at different parties, like, for example, Sensation, but also doing marathon sets of 10 hours and things like that. The third thing which I've been focusing on the last couple of years is producing. I think that eventually, even after my 30s, I really got the time and a little bit of the rest to focus on this. So this became the third passion in my life and also my professional career. And I think I can say now, after a year of 7, I've come to a point that I've been able to create a sound which I feel is my personal sound. So these three things are what I have done. I see a lot of differences. I see also a lot of similarities. And what I wanted to do today is take those three and talk about, in 15 minutes, about some of the things I've done. But I also want to ask some questions to you, because I'm interested in what the people are focused on right now. So I'm going to start with the party element. I feel for a DJ that it's starting, it's very important and useful to have an own club night or a party or something you're doing for different reasons. So first of all, I'd like to know here from the people around here that are active in nightlife, who is doing a club night? Yes, still going strong? Yes, of course. Okay, and you, I know. Okay, and you, and might I ask, for example, you, what your role is in this club night?
I'm the main organizer.
Yeah.
I would say I have my own concept with label and radio show.
Yeah. What's the name of it?
The Funky Cat.
Phony Cat.
Yeah,
Funky Cat. Yeah. Okay. And is your role also that you are active as an artist in the concept yourself?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And what I'm wondering about is the concept you started. Why did you start this?
Because I wanted the ultimate place for my own music.
Yeah.
Like where there's a perfect match between music and the audience and all setting to create the ultimate experience around it.
Okay. And can I summarize this as that you're trying to create a platform for yourself as an artist?
Pretty much.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think this is very important for every young artist. It's as simple as this, a stage. I'm standing here on a stage. When you're throwing your own parties or your club night, you're creating your own stage. A lot of things that you hear from different artists is that it's hard to get gigs, or I'm working on this and that, but I'm not finding an opportunity. When you're just organizing a simple club night, you can create this stage for yourself, not only literally to play, but also a stage for yourself to promote yourself and profile yourself online. So that's an important thing. You just create your own stage, but also a place for you to invite other people. So if you are, for example, interested in a certain DJ that you'd like to be in touch with, who's not responding to your questions about listening to your music, for example, if you invite those people to come to your stage, you're also creating a sort of social scene. And my advice would always be just to start very small. If you're just organizing a party for 75 people or 100 people, it doesn't matter, because the stage is already there. You have a filled agenda, you're doing stuff, you have something to talk about, you're creating your own scene and your sound. Okay.
Do you not think it's harder now than it was when you started, though? Being that, you know, the scene has grown massively over the past 20 years, etc., especially in Holland. Do you not think it's harder for somebody like this young man to stand up, create that whole social platform now?
No, I think it's easier, actually. Because today, well, it depends on what you expect. If you want to start off and expect yourself to be right at the level of, for example, a Thuishaven within a year, that's not realistic. But I'm talking right now from the perspective of a DJ and an artist. And I think what's made it easier right now is that even if you have a small party for 75 people, you can do this, for example, every month, and you have a podcast every month which you can use online. You have photography which you can use for your social media. You have a story to tell. These things were all completely different 10 years ago when you had to start, and the party had to be so smashing good that people told each other about it, and then it came. That was the only way. So now you can create something out of something really small and let it grow organically. So personally, I think that there's a lot of new possibilities there, which weren't there before. So that's what I would advise to everybody now, is just to start off small and to make this grow as a snowball. But I'd also like to tell something about my own experiences from my past and the way that I grew in this. Personally, I didn't start anything to create a platform. I created it because I was completely obsessed with the scene, with a goal, and of creating something which I thought was missing. Is this anything that you also recognize, or are you more working on your profile as an artist? Is anybody doing a party because they feel that throwing a party is something very special to do? Yes, you? Could you tell a little bit more about this?
Thanks. I've done a couple of parties now over the years, and the first one I gave was in 2011, I think. And the whole reason I started that was mainly because when I went to parties, there wasn't a certain vibe which I wasn't seeing there.
Yeah.
And that was also the case why I started DJing. But that exactly describes what you say. It's something you want to implement something new into the scene. Yeah.
Okay, and could you tell us a little bit about which elements you use to create a vibe or an atmosphere?
I think a very important aspect is set dressing. So if you do a party...
Excuse me, what was that?
Set dressing. So how do you... what do people experience when they come in? What clothes do you wear? For example, like something that Association White does. You know, everyone has to come in white. That's something very different from other parties.
Yeah.
So you give yourself like a business card, basically, for people who come to your party. So if you, for example, like one thing we did was put on a very big industrial van in each corner of the party. So everyone, you know, who has been to that party will remember it as the party where the big fans were hanging.
Yeah.
And that's a small thing, but that's one of the things that you can do to let yourself stand out from the crowd.
Yeah, I understand what you say, and I recognize those elements. And personally, I always really liked the fact when you combine a lot of these elements, which already start with the name and the concept, a concept of myself which I'm still proud about and happy when I think of it, was Zomerpark. This was a party we did with the GZG organization, which stood out because it was a festival with only one stage. So this is hard to do. Festivals always have multiple stages. And this has a reason, because people get bored. So they want to see different things, walk a little, go to the toilet, etc. So if you do a festival for one stage, this is a risk. But then again, like I said, with the smaller club nights, we started small, and it grew from there to a point that we reached 5,000 people at the biggest point, which is not that much when you compare it, for example, with Awakenings. But 5,000 people on one stage with the atmosphere that is totally off, that is quite special, I would say. So in this concept, we worked on the concept, we worked on the decoration, we worked on a programming that had to be perfect, because if you have one stage and there's a DJ or a slot that's not working, it's just not working out as a whole. The party is down. So all of these different things have to be correct. The text has to be correct. The communication with your audience has to be good. It has to look good. It has to feel good. It has to sound good. And when you combine all these elements and it works, for me, my experience was that throwing a party is a creative process as well. And something that I love very much, and when it works out, it's just a very special thing to experience the emotions that come at a point like that. But those are two different things. Creating a party because you want to create a special moment, or a second thing, creating a party or a small club night because you want to create a stage for yourself as a DJ. You can combine it, but when you just want to start small and don't want to take too many risks, like I did, which also went wrong a couple of times, it's better to just take it safely there. Are there any questions from you in the room about these things? Yes?
Can you tell some of the mistakes you made?
Yeah. Well, I'm not really 100% sure if I would call it a mistake, but what I'm trying to describe is that when I started out with creating these parties, it was also always from an idealistic point of view. So it had to be perfect. We did everything we could to create this sort of an ultimate rave. And many times it worked out very well, but what you could call a mistake is that we never really managed to get this financially right.
When you say we as well, how many people were involved in the?
Well, I was with an organization of different people. Started small. In the end, we also created a company. The example I gave about the Zomerpark party was for 5,000 people, which brought such big risks that it was also a BV. I don't know the English word for that, but it's a different...
Limited company.
Okay. So you could say that on a business point of view, we did some interesting things, but we never really managed to get a business which was safely running out of it. So that was something, yeah, I would call it a mistake, or well, it's not as you would like it to be. But then again, a lot of these things in our work, whether it's producing music, DJing, or creating parties, it's if you do things with so much passion and you want to stand out, well, that's a very hard thing, but then standing out and also being financially solid, that's almost impossible. Only the really professional ones that stay a long period in our scene, learn a lot of lessons and keep going, they tend to manage it. Anybody still in for throwing parties? Question there?
How old were you when you threw your first party?
Well, my first real party was around 18. But I've always done little things and social stuff. But the first party that was kind of serious was 18. I saw a finger here? Yeah.
Hi, I was just wondering, like, what your experience being with so many large to small events was with sponsorships, and did you ever receive money as a sponsorship, or was it just sometimes alcohol sponsors? Did you receive subsidized things to sell? And, you know, have you worked much with sponsors over the years?
Yes, we worked with sponsors. I have to say this was not really my part of the organization because I was focused on the creative side, but we did work with alcohol brands. But then again, this was also something from the standpoint of our organization. We were kind of idealistic, And then sponsorship was allowed, but we never allowed it to play such a big role that they no. And if you want some serious sponsoring, you have to give a part of yourself. Okay.
What was the name of your first organization? First party?
GZG. Gasten zonder grenzen. Good times, good times. Okay, I want to switch towards the second phase, if there's no questions left. Okay, one.
Yes, okay. What kind of advice would you give someone who just started out organizing parties in his hometown, but he doesn't know if he wants to do it because all the venues are already taken by other organizations? So, would you, my only thought is throw illegal parties?
Yeah, that's a good option, but it's but it's also a risky option. Now, I mean that's a little bit the way I did it, but now I would advise to start small and don't feel ashamed if you start, for example, in a small bar or something. Even if you throw techno nights. I mean, for me personally, techno is not the music to play in a bar. But if you're just small and you feel that you don't have the audience yet and all the places are taken, believe me, everybody has started small. Carl Cox also started with his camper and just drove to places and started. So don't expect too much of yourself, but start.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
the most important thing here. Start.
100%, yeah.
Okay. Just do it.
Okay, then the second thing I'd like to talk to you about is the art of DJing. I think this is, in my life, the thing that I think is the most beautiful thing. But I'd like to know, how is the art of DJing perceived by the people nowadays? Is anybody here that's an artist considering him or herself DJ first? Okay. A few, and if we producer first, a little bit more, but no, none of the same. That's obvious. Okay, and are there also people here that are organizing parties and also producing? Okay, you're doing everything now. DJing, producing, and throwing parties.
I'm not DJing so much.
Okay, yeah. Okay, and of the people who are DJing, who is still playing with vinyls? 4. Okay. And are there also people that are using an interface or laptops? It's funny that it's completely balanced. Nothing is 100% going on these days. Different options. Okay. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about my own experience. Like I said, I was really obsessed with throwing the parties first. In my mind and in my heart, I always kind of switch in the things I'm really into. And the DJ phase, I really wanted to learn everything. But there's so many elements in DJing. First of all, there's the record collection and the record selection. I've had, maybe you recognize the question, kan jij me niet een keer leren draaien? It's been asked to me so many times, and then I always say, well, you can come back to me when you've created a musical taste. Because I cannot teach anything about using a switcher or a mixer if you don't have a musical taste. So when I started, this was in the vinyl days, and we drove with a car to Frankfurt to buy our records there. And well, the process of it is already fun because you have the feeling that something very special is happening because you're driving all the way to Frankfurt. That's different now. So I'm wondering if this element of musical selection is still a very important part of the people here in the room. You're saying yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
You have to tell a story, so every track is you have to plan it. So you have to tell the story in your head, and you have to know what you want to tell the audience. So
Yeah.
it's very important to
And do you feel that your tracks are still special when everybody can buy it, and when you play them somebody can use Shazam and has it a minute after?
Yeah, and back in the early days, it was special to have a track who nobody has. But I think when you tell that the right story and you play the right tracks on the right time, nobody cares. If it fits and it's, yeah, that's my opinion.
Okay, I agree. Luckily. Okay, and then I'm also really curious about the technical element, because also in the vinyl days it was something you really had to spend a lot of time, and also there's the possibility of making a mistake. When you just, I've had it personally with my gig in the arena for 40,000 people with the needle skipping, stuff like that. That's horrible. So this is maybe a little bit different now, but I'm guessing somebody there was just nodding. How is this nowadays, the technique of DJing? Is this still very important?
Still, you have to know the basics. So, final, you have to learn how to pitch and something like that. Nowadays, you have the famous sync button. Everything is in place, so you have to.
Who's using the sync button?
Everybody is.
Yeah, so seriously, yeah. Okay.
When you go with remix sets, something native that you have one, and you have to use the sync button.
Yeah.
I think back in the days you had to focus on your pitch. Now you can focus on other things. So it's a whole different way of DJing.
Yeah.
It's more like a performance than DJing.
Yeah, I understand what you say, and I think this is what makes it different, but there's one thing that will always remain the same, which is that you have to stand out. It doesn't matter if you use technique or only records produced by others, or if you have strange hair or whatever, you have to stand out, and that's what I want to talk about a little bit later. But I saw someone with a question here.
Yeah, not a question, like I want to add something like this. But people who learn to DJ with vinyl have a completely different perspective on people who only learn on do DJ on say DJs.
And why is that?
Because yeah, like he said, you have to emphasize and constantly monitor your turntables, your pitch right.
Yeah.
Okay. And with the DJs, you have your pitch, but it's 120 BPM, 120 BPM, one button, you press it the second time, and there you go, and that's it.
And you have more time to do other stuff.
Yeah, one more time,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, I understand what you're saying.
The analog part is way more difficult than the digital part on the DJ, so to say, absolutely. You also learn to be more creative. Yeah.
I think that's special for
When,
techno, though, right?
how do you learn to be more creative?
Well, if you see like your track is ending, you have to act quick. You
Yeah.
have to act in a different kind of way that you can't just put it on a loop.
Yeah.
You have to do something.
I agree on this. The mixing gets more spectacular sometimes. Yeah. Okay, well, coming back to my own experience, I'm going to have a little water first. Coming back to my own experience, I thought it would be nice to take two examples of my own DJ career, and I thought it would be nice to take two opposites. So the first one, I told you that I did marathon sets earlier on. So I want to take one example. When I was still playing at the Amsterdam-based club Studio 80 a lot, I was asked every now and then to play an all-nighter, and it could be 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours or longer. And for me, as I talked about the art of DJing, this was like the summum, the greatest, the highest. You could do everything, all sorts of sounds. I've always been very interested in different music styles. Start off slowly, create peak moments, back into a more relaxed atmosphere and all sorts of stuff, and completely getting in a spiritual flow where you let everything go. And yeah, it's almost as, what's the word for spirit? Even kijken. Getting a little bit tired now with the English word. Let's skip this word. I'm just wondering if there's anybody here in the room that's also doing marathon sets on a bigger stage. No. Okay. Well, that's kind of funny because I also think that this is a thing of the past. If you want to stand out now, doing marathon sets is not really the way to go. Also because there's different things now to stand out in. For example, you said something about it creates more time. People use effects now. Stuff like that. So if this is something that people are not doing too much at the moment, I don't want to spend too much attention to it and switch to the second example which I had, which was also some sort of a step towards the third phase, producing. The second example I wanted to give was my main stage slots at, is this my phone? No. At Sensation. This was a process I had a few years to learn. I was asked to join the organization, did many sets for them. They wanted to create a tech house sound for the bigger stage, but this was something that needed some time. And what I needed to learn throughout the years was that playing for 30,000 people or 40,000 people is completely different than the 10-hour set I was just talking about. There's no time for experiments. There's no time for moments that are not peak moments. I'm thinking now that we had a few of those together. The energy level needs to be at the top all of the time. And maybe it's no surprise that at the end of my period there, that was also the moment that EDM broke through. Because EDM is just a perfect sound for bigger stages. At the same time, it was not my sound, so we parted there. But what I learned in those few years is that there's a few rules to playing big audiences, and one of them is that you can just put 3 or 4 BPMs onto your normal sound, and in the room it will sound the same. So if you play at 125 BPM normally, you can just easily put it at 130, and when you're in the room, it just sounds normal. I don't know how this works, but with such extreme stages, the BPM just needs to be up. A second thing is that I started with cutting tracks. This was new for me, but the tracks which are about 7 to 8 minutes, the same process works there. They feel as if they take 20 minutes. It's not possible in a room like that. So what I did was just cut all the irrelevant part out, have tracks of about 3 to 4 minutes, possibly with 2 breaks, and then you keep that energy level all the time high. Is anybody here into music like we talked about, like tech house or the groove-based music that's a little bit more into the commercial way? Yes, you? Okay, and what is your...
I really like what you did before, like 10-hour sets, so where people can experiment, people different vibe instead of putting energy all the time.
Yeah, I understand. Well, the same goes for me, to be honest, but it was an opportunity that I got. It was interesting for me to do. But I noticed that from a creative standpoint, it was less exciting for me, because you create something actually already at your home, and then you just do this on stage. It's a complete different craft. You have 1 hour, and the last sets that I did there were, let's say, 90% already created at home. And then you're moving as an artist more into the direction of a producer, and that's the third phase I want to talk about now. Who's producing techno at the moment here? Okay, yeah. So what's the most important thing in creating techno? Technology. And this was a thing I needed to learn a lot about technology, because you can DJ, you can create your parties, and you can know everything about music. But for me, the lesson was, okay, you can know a lot of things, but when you create yourself, you have to learn a lot. This is not going from one day to the other. So it took me years of self-learning, and also working with a lot of people that I learned a lot from. But the technology element is just very, very important in creating techno, because the grooves and the beats have been a little bit the same for a long time, but we tend to learn new things every time, which make it sound different. Who's into the drum code sound right now? Yeah? Okay. Could you tell us a little bit about what you think is special about the drum code sound?
I guess it's the tension they build in the tracks. It's the spheric sounds, and yeah, probably for me also the kick and the bass.
Yeah, the kick and the bass. But the kick and the bass have always been in techno music. Yeah. So it's the way it sounds. Yeah.
The combination of sounds.
Yeah, I would agree as well. It's the combination of sound, the way it sounds, but it's also the way it's produced. And this might be a little bit like Vloeken in de Kerk, but I also see some similarities with the main stage sounds that I was talking about. All the time there's something happening in these drum code tracks, which is techno these days. Big breaks, ecstatic moments. This was not what techno was about when it started. It was only loops and grooves and stuff like that. So I think the whole revolution that took place on the bigger stages with the EDM culture is also moving a little bit towards techno now, which I find very interesting, but it can also move into a direction that's not a little bit less interesting.
That's why they call it big boom techno, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but on that point, man zonder schade. If you go back to Sasha Digweed, the progressive time that you know, you could call it big room house back then as it was, you know, the like you said, the 5, 6, 7, 8 minute, 10-minute tracks that were allowed to evolve, the Tenaglia times.
Yeah.
That, you know, was house and techno. You know, everybody's kind of putting it into its own little genres within the, you know, the movement that is techno.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, is that a good thing? When you said it excites you or it's interesting to you, it's got to be a good thing if it's like what Carl Cox said, you know, if kids are coming in with the EDM, it's a doorway, you know, to a wonderland of good music.
I totally agree, and I'm not trying to give my own opinion on the case. What I was trying to say is that the most important element in techno is technique. And that I feel that what we're calling techno now is different because it sounds different. But like I said to our friend here, is that the bass and the kick have always been elements. I was talking with a friend of mine a few days ago that it was at my first Awakenings party in 1999. I realized it was almost 20 years ago. But a lot of things stay the same, but the technique changes. That was my point. And I also wanted to mention this because it was the first realization for me when I started in the process of creating music. But there's also some other things I'd like to mention. Is there somebody here that's experienced the creative process after a period of DJing first? Yes, you? Could you describe to us maybe one thing you noticed that was different?
While DJing, I was always like enjoying the vibes of the song and just partying myself also behind the decks. And while producing, I'm really diving into details and just getting fussed about all the possibilities about what I can do with the music instead of like also being more or less a listener of the song.
Yeah.
You're getting more like in a composition state of mind about what do I want to create in a track.
Yeah, I hear something what you're saying about these possibilities. Is this something you experience as something nice?
Sometimes yes, and if I try to reduce the possibilities to give myself boundaries, and then I don't like them because I see too much possibilities. But when I'm like bored on the boundaries, then I get the need to like I want to use a new synth or I want to use the new possibilities that are available.
Yeah. And in this process, have you managed to release some of the projects you've worked on into an EP?
No,
No,
not yet.
not yet. Okay. Well, it will come.
Yeah, I'm trying. Been to the demo drops here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this freedom thing is something which I found very interesting because this is different than the process as a DJ, and it's also different, obviously, as the process we talked about in creating a party. Because when you go to the studio, you come into a new situation where you can just absolutely do everything you want. And for me, as a DJ, coming from a period where I was playing 10-hour sets with house, techno, breaks, UK-inspired stuff, which is all very nice when you have a dance floor and you think, okay, now's the moment for this, now's the moment for that, okay, let's try a little bit of this. That can work, but when I started making my own music, this was very hard, man. Where to start? I like so many different things. Is this something that you people recognize? Yeah? Could you tell a little bit about this? Have you?
Personally, for me, it's I found a way to produce for the last few years is my emotional state. If I'm really angry, I make more aggressive rhythmic music, and if I'm really down, sad, or something else, it's more soft. It's a way to release my energy and mijn ei kwijt kunnen.
Yeah, I understand. And the same question to you is has it resulted in a release for you?
Yes, I've made my first album last year.
Okay, congratulations. That's nice.
I have there. I can show it.
Well, maybe later. Okay, and are there one or two styles that are mostly dominant in your album, or is it a really different collection of sounds?
It's I don't know actually. It's.
I would call it a pretty heavy kind of house, but deeper. It's
Deep house.
No.
yeah, heavy deep house.
Heavy deep house. Okay.
I don't know what to call it. It's not a genre. Or
Okay. Well, I'm gonna cut in now. If we're going so specific about the sound, I was just wondering if it was one specific sound or a combination of different elements.
It's definitely a combination.
Yeah.
For me, there were a few elements that stood out, like the kick. It's a characteristic sound in my album. It's, but mostly also chord progressions of or rhythmic elements that align on the album. But I don't know how to explain it.
No. Okay. Well, thanks anyway. For me personally, an album is a goal that I'm still working towards. So I admire you for that. Nice
Thanks.
one. Getting back to the subject, I was mentioning the fact that it was very difficult for me to find a way, and especially when you're into different music types, this can be a long search. But I want to make a little step back towards the first phase about starting off with your own club night. What eventually was the step for me that was the most interesting, and that's why I also asked you guys, was just release. Just release and see what happens. The first releases I had were on very small labels. Nothing was happening, just like I described with the example of you don't expect yourself to be at the thuishaven level when you throw a party. The same goes with releasing. I mean, there's hundreds and thousands of people releasing music every year. So if you start off, don't expect anything to happen. But the process of making it in your home environment, fixing this, creating a good mastering, combining it with nice artwork and seeing it actually being played by other people, getting reactions from that, good or bad, etc. That's what eventually got me started in going forward in finding my own sound. First of all, I was a little bit hesitative about this because I felt as a DJ I had accomplished already a couple of things. But producing is a complete new game. So you cannot expect too much of your DJ experience when you start producing. It's a new game. It needs time. It needs years, and it also needs some things which are not going so well. So a few of the releases I had were not really ontvangen. What's the word for it? Can anybody? Received very well. Okay, then you make another one. Just going and going and going. And in the end, or not necessarily in the end, but what was a breakthrough for me was a release 100% pure. Does anybody know the label here? Yeah? Okay. It's a little bit more into the techno direction, but still it's not real techno. We're on the 50 Hertz stage here, so I guess when we talk techno, that's techno. But why I want to mention this is because you never, in the producing, you can also never expect what's going to happen. 100% Pure is a label of a big history and a big legacy. But at the moment, it's not being mentioned, for example, with a drum code or labels like that. But I knew Dylan already for a long time. I sent him some stuff after a few small releases, and he said yes. And all of a sudden, this became a very big EP. I had 2 tracks in the Beatports Top 100 of the techno section. It was played by a lot of big artists, and all of a sudden, after a few small releases where nothing is happening, you have an EP that's doing very well. Well, obviously this is nice. You think I've done something very well, but the most important thing for me was that I thought, okay, there's some sort of a sound that's developing now, and this is not something you can think of when you start off. This is just happening, just by making, creating, releasing small stuff. And eventually, which was also important for me in this process, was that it was in a time where I was not doing any club nights, because it made me completely free. So after the first phase in which I was doing a lot of events, a second phase in which I was very focused on DJing and the art, I came into a phase that I was a little less active as a promoter, but also as a DJ. You hear a lot about this from producers that are successful, that they have a few not so social years. Well, the same was for me. You're just working on your music, and you're not influenced about the parties you're playing or the people you're hanging out with. It just comes from yourself. It's a real dusty cliche, but cliches are true, and the same happened to me. Question?
Yes. You said you were all by yourself, not doing any parties. So have you had the anxiety to lose touch with the community?
Yes, but there's a lot of anxiety in the creative process, and also a lot of things that are not so nice. For me personally, I don't like the fact of being alone for a long time, for example. This is one of the elements that I really don't like. I came from a very social group and always partying and stuff, etc. But the creative process in our music is alone. But yeah, you need to fix it. So I did it, and yeah, the rewards are very high for yourself. But what was your question specifically?
Well, if you are scared to lose touch with the community.
Yeah.
Because you had a big community, you had your parties, and often something start producing, and you have to invest a lot of time, which you can't invest in the parties. I think that's the reason why you lost touch.
Yeah, I understand the question better. Well, I wasn't scared for it at first, but I did notice that it was happening. And it's also, from an artistic point of view, it's not nice if you're not having as much gigs as you had. But a theme in towards all the choices I made was always that I do something from the heart, completely with obsession and overgave. And this is something that can be very productive and creative, but it's not always fun, you know. And I'm not always saying that it is smart, or somebody asked me, did you make mistakes? Why? Through a lot of parties that didn't make any money. I had phases in which I was maybe lonely and not really connected with the community, etc. But for me, this is the way it works, and I'm not really sure if this is also the way it works for others, but I wanted to talk about my story here and the phases that I had, and this solitary phase of focusing on the creative process was one of it. And yeah, I'm very thankful for it in the end. And I think you have to sacrifice a lot of things if you want to be successful. Because if you try everything a little bit 50-50, then it's not happening for sure.
So that's what I needed to hear. Thanks.
Yeah.
Alles of niks.
Are there any questions about this, or maybe move into another direction? You have had a few first.
With crafting your own sound, who and what were your big influences?
Oh yeah, this was also a topic I wanted to discuss with you guys. Well, for me the biggest step was that I eventually started working with engineers. For me, I'm not really a technical guy, but like I said at first, when you want to create techno, you need to learn about the technique. So this is also an example of not everything is fun. If you want to learn, you also have to do things that you're not really familiar with. If you only do things that you're familiar with, you're not going to learn. So I started for myself, I did courses, worked on it myself, and in the end I noticed that it was for me better to work with engineers, so guys who are very far and learned at the technical side. But this was also a complete new process. How are you going to make something that you want to feel connected with somebody else? This is a complete new phase, and also a new way of looking at creativity, because personally I feel that when you make something yourself or do it yourself, you're closer connected to what's coming out. Do you understand what I mean when I say that? Yeah? How does this work for you?
When I'm creating, at a certain moment, I just start to fall in love with what's getting on there. I like it, I don't like it, I most of the time stop the project. Then I fall in love with it, and I'm getting so much feedback and energy. And I want to continue and want to finish the track.
Yeah. Have you ever worked with somebody else? Yeah? Okay, is there anybody here in the room that's had experience with this? Yes, you? How did it work for you? Okay, that's easy.
Well, I like to collaborate with people, so that's all good because you can learn from each other.
Yeah.
And everybody has a different way to work around the audio software. But yeah, producing is a whole new game, and I think I'm at my top when I'm alone in the studio.
Yeah.
And I don't, like for instance, when somebody wants a snare like this and I want a snare like that, yeah, you have to have our discussion how the sound shoots. So.
Yeah.
And when you're alone, you don't have to discuss with that with other people.
Yeah, I understand. And I can completely see how this could work when you're in a position like that. For example, simple stuff like finding sounds, just keeping them for a while till there's the moment when you can use them. These are things which are very nice and easy when you work by yourself. You can have a 10-year project and just gradually evolve in towards a direction with not having to do any compromises with somebody else. Yeah, that's nice. Well, I tried this for a while, but like I said, it worked for me better with an engineer in the end. And a big reason for this is that for me, in the end, the end result is what I'm most excited about. So, for example, with the parties we threw, was also with a lot of different people. Everything, all noses, all thoughts, and all feelings were in towards the direction of creating something special. With the DJing as well, it's not your own records that you created, but you're creating something with the moment in the people in the room, and something's happening. Well, for me, when I had this first release on 100% Pure and came to terms with the fact that I was working with somebody else, very beautiful things started to happen. I let go of the fact of working towards a release, just making music, just making hours and letting it leave for a while. I think this is one of the most important things for me personally in creating the music, just creating it for creating it and leaving it aside mostly for about a month or 3. Then I'm far enough from the process to see what's happening. Well, the last release I had myself was a personal highlight for me, and this was also a highlight because of this process. It's a highlight because it's nice, but it's also a highlight because of the way I work towards it. This is what you call a moment where everything comes together. Like I said, I've been working with this engineer on a lot of music, and in this process we try to do a lot of things in a certain way. So always start, for example, with using some samplers at the beginning, creating some sounds, and then leaving them for a while. Then taking everything to your Ableton project, work on it there. Maybe later some resampling, and at other moments you collect, for example, samples of voices and stuff like that. So you don't have to force yourself to find a vocal at the moment that you need one, because you already have them. These are all things you can work on whenever moment you want, and then you just trust yourself at the fact that this will come together at a certain point. So in the latest release I did myself for off recordings, this was what's happening. I was in touch with the label manager André Kroom. He liked my music, but for some reason we just couldn't find an EP. So this was good, that was good, but there wasn't an EP for it. So then I came to a sample package which I had created myself, added this to one of the tracks that we already worked on, presented it to him. He said this was okay for an A track, and then he decided which of the tracks would make for an EP. I could choose the remixer, and then for me this was personally a very nice ending of a creative process. And that's a little bit the broader scope of what I wanted to tell you. In all those phases I've always worked on projects with big passion and commitment. Some of the things went very, very well, other things were a little bit hard, but for me personally what I get most excited about is when you've worked on a thing like this, when at a certain moment everything comes together and you've created something nice to add to this world. So that was my story.
Wonderful.
Are there any more questions?
Well, we'll push for time, actually. So, ladies and gentlemen, please make some noise for the man with no shadow. We're going to just got to say, if it's